As the legendary guitarist Robert Johnson famously put it, Chicago has been a sweet home for the blues. And today, you're joining us for a deep dive into the rich, complex, and really vital history of Chicago blues. We're going to unpack how this distinct urban sound came to define a city and, well, profoundly influence global music. Setting the stage for so much of what we hear today. Our mission is pretty simple. We're taking your sources, encyclopedic entries, historical timelines, detailed overviews, and pulling out the most important nuggets. This isn't just facts read aloud, it's your shortcut to being truly well informed about this incredible musical genre. We're going to explore its diverse, sometimes contradictory roots, from the huge shifts of the Great Migration right up to its global impact.
Yeah, what's truly remarkable here is how Chicago blues emerged not just as like a musical style, but as a vibrant cultural signature of a city. It was born directly from that massive African-American migration and then, shaped profoundly by the growth of the modern music industry. It's a really compelling story of regional folk genius meeting savvy ethnic entrepreneurial spirit, and its echoes, they still resonate through cultural and social practices even today.
Okay, so let's begin at the beginning then. How did blues, primarily a rural southern thing, really find its sweet home in, well, the bustling city of Chicago? It all starts with one of the largest demographic shifts in American history, the Great Migration.
Exactly. If we kind of zoom out to see the bigger picture, the Great Migration, spanning roughly from 1916 to 1970, saw millions of African Americans leave the rural South. They were heading for industrial cities like Chicago, seeking economic opportunity, sure, but also escaping the really harsh Jim Crow laws, that whole system of segregation and disenfranchisement in the South. Musicians like Big Bill Broonzy and Muddy Waters, they were part of this profound movement, bringing their deep musical roots with them.
Wow. So this massive influx of talent must have immediately started reshaping the musical landscape. How quickly did we see a distinctive Chicago sound emerge in those early days? Because, in the 1920s, we already had artists like Alberta Hunter, Cal Davenport, Blind Lemon Jefferson recording locally, under figures like J. Mayo, Ink Williams at Paramount Records. But I understand the big network of blues clubs we associate with Chicago today that didn't actually exist yet, right?
That's right. So the key question is, where did this music first find its footing? Where did it flourish in this new urban setting? Well, an early, absolutely pivotal incubator was the open-air market on Maxwell Street. Just picture this sprawling, vibrant, noisy hub, one of the biggest open-air markets in the country. It was just a natural spot for street musicians to perform, earn some tips, jam with others. And those connections, they gradually led to house parties and then eventually to the club scene. A clear path, really, from the street to the stage.
Right. And this is where the story takes a really fascinating turn. The sound itself started to change basically out of necessity. Acoustic guitars, which were fine in quieter rural places, they just couldn't cut it in a noisy, packed Chicago club. You needed volume. This practical problem led straight to electrification. You can almost imagine that moment, the first amplified guitar slicing through the crowd noise.
Exactly. A literal power surge for the blues. And it wasn't just about the need for volume. There was also this unique synergy with local industry. Chicago, from the 30s through the early 60s, was actually the world capital of guitar making. Think about that. Companies like National, Supro, Harmony, Kay, Silvertone, they were churning out hundreds of thousands of electric guitars and amps right there. This local manufacturing boom, it undoubtedly fueled the adoption of that new amplified sound. It let musicians really push the boundaries.
Okay, so the Great Depression obviously hit the music industry hard. Record sales plummeted. But even as migration slowed a bit, Chicago stayed this powerful incubator. The wartime emergence of local labels like Bluebird, for example, saw hits like Lil Green's Romance in the Dark in 40 and Memphis Minnie's Me and My Chauffeur Blues in 41. These tracks really show the blues adapting, evolving, finding new audiences, even during tough times.
Absolutely. By the 1950s, Chicago blues truly hit its stride. It developed its signature sound, that prominent driving rhythm section, the heavy use of amplification, the focus on electric guitar and harmonica leads. And of course, that strong, undeniable connection back to Mississippi Delta styles of playing and singing. This period saw the rise of truly iconic record labels, labels that would define the genre.
And then we get to the label, the one many people think of first, Chess Records. Founded by the brothers Leonard and Phil Chess, they took over Aristocrat Records, renamed it Chess in 1950, and went on to sign and produce just an incredible roster of artists, true legends.
It's almost hard to fathom the sheer talent on that Chess roster. Muddy Waters, McKinley Norganfield, Little Walter Jacobs, Howlin' Wolf Chester Burnett, and Willie Dixon. These guys were the quintessential Chicago blues artists. And Willie Dixon, he was particularly central, not just a brilliant bassist and songwriter for basically everyone, Muddy Waters, Chuck Berry, Bo Diddley, but he also supervised most of the studio sessions at Chess from the mid-50s onward. He truly shaped that iconic Chess sound. The energy they captured was just raw. These weren't just musicians, they were like sonic architects, building a new sound, brick by amplified brick.
Yeah, and their sound didn't just influence music. It basically rewrote the rulebook for popular genres. Imagine that raw, amplified energy of Muddy Waters. It wasn't just a song. It was the DNA for rock and roll, the blueprint for the backbone of soul music. Muddy Waters' Rolling Stone from 1950, Hoochie Coochie Man from 54, they had this huge international influence, famously inspiring bands like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. It's like finding the original source code for a whole musical operating system.
Right. Which naturally makes you ask, how did this music reach such a wide audience?
Yeah.
Especially beyond Chicago itself.
Yeah.
Well, black appeal disc jockeys like Al Benson and Big Bill Hill were absolutely key. They made sure records from Chess, VJ, and other labels got crucial airplay. Initially, yeah, among African-American communities, but eventually white teenagers started tuning in, started noticing.
Yeah.
They were crucial catalysts.
So Chicago blues wasn't just making noise in the city. It was literally setting the stage for a global musical revolution. By the late 50s, early 60s, you had a new generation of West Side artists, people like Otis Rush, Magic Sam, Buddy Guy, carrying the sound even further, building on those amplified foundations.
And stepping back to see the bigger picture, the influence spread way beyond Chicago. In 1959, Willie Dixon and Memphis Slim did this groundbreaking tour of England and the Middle East. But that was just the start. They'd returned to Europe in '62 with a full roster for the first of many annual American folk blues festivals. This kind of international exposure was just critical for the genre's global reach. It planted the seeds for everything that came next.
And this is where the story gets really compelling for rock and roll fans. Chuck Berry, often called the father of rock and roll, right? He originally signed with Chess Records because Muddy Waters himself told him to audition there. And what's more, Willie Dixon and other blues musicians actually played on some of Berry's early iconic records. You can literally hear that direct line, that powerful blues backbone in his riffs.
Oh, absolutely. And what's fascinating is how this connection across the Atlantic led directly to the British blues movement. In the early 60s, beat groups over there, the Rolling Stones, the Yardbirds, the Animals, they were just devouring Chicago blues. The Stones, for example, they basically formed because of a shared intense love for Chicago blues back in '62. Some of these young British bands even got the incredible chance to back blues legends like Sonny Boy Williamson II when he toured England in '63 and '64. Imagine that.
And it wasn't only the British bands. American artists like the Paul Butterfield Blues Band, John P. Hammond, Charlie Musselwhite, they were also performing in that Chicago blues style, keeping it popular stateside. Then later you get bands like Cream, Rory Gallagher, the Allman Brothers Band, doing their own interpretations, drawing heavily on those Chicago blues roots. They really contributed hugely to the rise of blues rock.
But, despite all that influence, the history since the '60s hasn't been straightforward. It's been contradictory, really. Periods of, recession alongside renewal. By the end of the '60s, blues started facing a commercial disadvantage against newer genres like soul and gospel. Chess Records, that powerhouse label, it eventually went out of business in 1975. And sadly, many of the older legendary clubs closed down too.
So the obvious question is, did the blues just fade away then?
No, not at all. While it definitely lost some of its central place in the African-American community's civic life, a pretty significant renaissance started building in the late '60s. And this resurgence, it was largely driven by a new audience. People coming from rock music, actively looking for roots artists, searching for the origins of the music they love.
Right, and this is where new local labels stepped in to fill that void, to nurture the revival. Labels like Delmark, recording artists like Junior Wells and Magic Sam helped preserve that authentic sound. And Alligator Records, led by Bruce Iglauer, who someone aptly called a folky Leonard Chess, really built a new national audience for Chicago blues, with artists like Coco Taylor and Lonnie Brooks getting the music to a whole new generation.
What's also really interesting is how the actual physical landscape of Chicago blues evolved with its audience. Those old line clubs, like the Checkerboard on the south and west sides, they were joined by new venues up on the north side. Kingston Mines is probably the most famous. These new places often cater more specifically to the growing tourist crowd and, predominantly white fans of the blues. It really shows a shift in demographics and how the genre adapted.
And maybe the most visible celebration of this whole enduring legacy is the annual Chicago Blues Festival. It started back in 1984, significantly, on the anniversary of Muddy Waters' death. It's just this powerful public statement of the city's pride in its musical heritage.
Exactly. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the fact that people still participate so actively in Chicago blues culture, it really underscores its role as living history.
Hmm.
It's not just music stuck in the past, it actively shapes memories of and also hopes for urban social life. It's really a testament to the power of art to adapt, survive, and keep telling a compelling story across generations. It connects the past and the present.
We've really taken quite the journey today, haven't we? From its origins and the Great Migration, fueled by Maxwell Street and the need for amplification, through that golden era of Chess Records and its huge impact on rock and roll, right up to its modern-day resurgence.
Yeah, you've definitely gained a clearer picture of how this distinctive sound, so deeply rooted in the African American experience, became a global force and, importantly, continues to evolve. It's just such a powerful example of music as a dynamic, living cultural thing that crosses boundaries and time.
So, what does all this mean for you listening right now? Well, next time you hear a blues riff, or maybe a rock song with that undeniable bluesy backbone, you'll know the incredible journey that sound took. Starting right there in the sweet home, that is Chicago, you'll hear the echoes of the Great Migration, the buzz of electric guitars from Maxwell Street, the legacy of Chess Records.
And maybe this raises an important question for you to think about. In what other ways does a city's specific history, its people, its industries, intertwine to create a unique and lasting cultural signature, like Chicago blues? What other forms of living history are shaping our world right now, maybe in ways we don't always notice?
Keep those questions brewing, and definitely join us next time for another deep dive.